The night is late. Yes, I am growing weary. Over the past few weeks, I've heard howling in the late-night hours. I've watched as livestock goes missing or is found torn completely open. There are rumors spreading and a heavy fear growing among the townsfolk, and so I walk now, hunting and searching for whatever is doing the killing. Now, however, the matter has become of a much more critical nature. You see, last night we found little Beth Sanders with her face eaten off, her body torn open, lying right in the middle of the street. The poor girl was just taking out the trash when she was attacked. Her parents came running naturally, but they said in the few seconds it took to hear her screams over the howling. They only opened the front door in time to see their little girl screaming as she was dragged into the pitch darkness. She was only 11 years old, and the raw fear in the single eye she had left said it all. My name is John Anderson. I'm a local hunter here in Michigan. I volunteered to hunt this monster that killed Beth and so many of the livestock around these parts. In my search for this thing, I found evidence suggesting that it lives deep in the woods. I imagine Beth was only partially devoured because of all the ruckus the town made when she went screaming into the dark. This is all speculation, but since this thing started harassing our town, our livestock numbers have drastically dwindled. I don't know if it attacked Beth simply because she happened to be there, or if it did so out of a desperate necessity for food, but it was incredibly vicious. The local authorities are keeping an eye out tonight as well, but none of them have volunteered to join my hunt just yet. Walking the path where Beth was dragged and ultimately found, I can still see faint drops of blood in the street that eventually lead off towards the woods. The further I head in, however, the less evidence I find of any sort of animal at all. I spend an hour out here before I finally find some prints in the deep snow. They look like a dog's or a wolf's foot, but they appear to be heading back into town, and they look fresh. That's when I hear the distant sound of rapid gunfire and screaming. Quickly, I turn around and sprint back to town. By the time I reach the streets, however, there is blood everywhere, and abandoned sheriff's vehicles litter the roadways. I follow a heavy trail of blood into the darkened alleys of our small town. It isn't long before I come upon the body of a dead sheriff. Their insides are ripped open and torn through. It is Deputy Williams, a man who had been with the sheriff's office for 22 years. His body has been ripped completely in half, a look of pure horror frozen on his dead face. Jesus, I thought to myself, what the hell could have done this? Gunfire rings out further ahead, and I rush forward until I hear a low growling, then a loud howl followed by a woman's terrified screams. I arrive in time to see a blood trail that goes up the steps of the local bank before heading back down into the main street. There are bodies everywhere. Spent shell casings are just as numerous as the dead. Blood and internal organs are scattered across the asphalt. Men and women in sheriff's uniforms are strewn all over. I was in absolute shock and terror. Gazing at the side of one of the abandoned vehicles, I see massive, bloody claw marks torn deep into the metal. What the hell had done this, and why? It didn't make any sense. First, it was livestock, but now it seemed to be actively hunting humans. Whatever it was, it had a thirst for pure carnage. These past weeks had been terrifying, but this was on a whole new level. The sheriff's office was all we had around here. We aren't a big town, so there was no need for any other sort of law enforcement, and the nearest city police are a long way off. It seems now, however, that our local law enforcement is gone for good. I heard a door creak open, and Richard, one of the locals, stepped out. He asked the only question that made any sense: what the hell happened? Those were the only words he spoke, and I didn't really have an answer. I told him to go back inside, being half in a state of shock myself. I stood there, waiting. It was quiet for the next few hours, and I imagine most of the folks were too afraid to leave their homes. I couldn't blame them. I waited until the sun rose before going door to door, trying to gather everyone to meet at the local church. Something had to be done, and it seemed we were entirely on our own now to handle this situation. I needed help. There was no way I felt comfortable taking this damn thing on by myself. Once we had the remaining locals inside the church, I had Jimmy lock and bar all the doors. This was unsettling to the townspeople, but I needed their undivided attention, and I didn't want to risk that thing trying to come for us. I motioned for everyone to quiet down. Then, I addressed them as best as I could. Listen up, folks. I understand y'all are scared, and rightfully so. I understand you have a lot of questions, and I simply do not have most of those answers. Before we get too deep into this conversation, I want to get one thing out of the way first. We need all women with children to leave the town before tonight. Pack light, keep your phones close, and we will inform you when it is safe to return. A loud uproar rang out, but once it died down, I continued. If you're a woman with no children and you have the ability to hunt, I'd like you to join me. The same goes for any and every man with a gun who is capable and willing to help me hunt this bastard down. I'm not sure what's out there, but it is extremely capable of killing. It started small with our livestock, but it has quickly turned on us. I believe the entire sheriff's department is dead, which makes us the only defense for our town. I won't force you to join me in my hunt, but I urge you to think about your town, those who have already fallen, and the possibility that this thing could move on to terrorize other families in neighboring towns. Think long and hard on that before making your decision. Those willing to stay and hunt with me, please remain here in the church. The rest of you, I wish you safe travels, and I pray for our safe return soon. A heavy silence fell over the room as we unlocked and unbarred the doors. A few minutes went by, and then most of the women and children went home, loaded up their cars, and began leaving the town. Ultimately, only 9 of us remained in the church, 7 men and 2 women. That was all that would be staying behind. I didn't blame those who left. In fact, I thought this would probably be a good thing, as it meant fewer potential fatalities. I didn't waste any time before speaking to the remaining group. All right, listen up. First, I'd like to say thank you to all of you. I know a lot is happening fast, but we need to keep our focus. We have to kill whatever the hell is out there murdering us. I'm thinking we stock up on ammunition and weapons from the local gun shop and the sheriff's office to bolster what we already have. Next, we need to take what's left of our livestock and use it as bait. I'd like to strategically place it so the thing has to move in a specific direction, leading it toward the old bank. We will split up into 2 teams and wait for the thing. The moment you see it coming for the livestock, you take your shot. I'm hoping we can kill it in an ambush, but be wary. This thing slaughtered our entire sheriff's department, and they had plenty of ammunition. If this thing somehow makes its way past the ambush and to the bank, I'll have a trap rigged to end it once and for all. We'll communicate via walkie-talkie, 1 for each of us. Stay safe out there, my friends. We'll begin dividing into teams now. Jack, Jimmy, Leanne, and August will make up Team 1. You all will wait up at the farm for the initial assault. Once the beast nestles in to feed on the livestock, fire upon it. Only do so from the hidden stands near the woods. You should be able to see the farm clearly through your rifle scopes. Once you've got the beast's attention, let out a deer call, and Team 2 will come out with a distraction. Team 2 will consist of Thomas, Darnell, Bob, and Nathan. As soon as you hear the signal, I want you all to turn on the sirens of the couple of abandoned sheriff's trucks you'll be waiting in halfway between the farm and the post office. Make sure to keep a safe distance from the thing. Once it gives chase, lead the beast into town and near the bank where I'll have the trap waiting. As soon as you hit the street just past the bank, shut off your sirens and lights and veer off in opposite directions. You are to circle back, pick up Team 1, and regroup at the church until further notice. Everyone seemed to understand the instructions, but there were a few questions about what I planned to do once the creature reached the bank. I informed them that I had placed several barrels of highly flammable and explosive material in the center of the street outside the bank. Once the creature got close while chasing Team 2, I'd fire a round into the barrels and hopefully light the monster up like Christmas. After explaining all this, everyone spent the rest of the day preparing. I wasn't sure if this would work, but it was the best plan I had. In truth, I hoped Phase 1 of the plan would be enough to take the beast down, but only time would tell. It didn't take long for night to fall. I was exhausted and weary from not sleeping the night before. I waited on the top floor of the bank, reflecting on the events. I pondered what I would do if this plan failed, or if anyone died as a result of it. I was set on killing this thing one way or another, and if the plan fell through, I probably wouldn't be alive to worry about the end result anyway. It was about 10 p.m. when I heard the sound of distant gunfire. Team 1 had made contact. After a minute or so, we heard the deer call over the radio. Sirens began to wail as Team 2's police SUVs sped in my direction. I checked in with Team 1, who said they were waiting for Team 2 to circle around, when suddenly a loud, static-filled screaming erupted over the radio. There was chaotic gunfire, soon followed by the sight of one of the sheriff's SUVs running straight into the explosive barrels I had laid out. A massive explosion roared, and fire engulfed the street as I heard the second SUV crash nearby. There's no way, I thought. I quickly fired around to distract the beast while I rushed downstairs and tried to get out into the street. To my horror, I saw a creature whose eyes glowed crimson in the dark. It was incredibly tall, standing on two muscular legs. It was lean, powerful, and featured the head of a wolf. It couldn't be. I thought clutched in the creature's teeth was Bob. He looked mortified as the thing's teeth sank into his torso and ripped him completely in half. There was blood and screams as the beast devoured most of Bob in a matter of seconds. Thomas kicked open the door of his crashed SUV, screaming and covered in fire from the exploded barrels. He was panicking, screaming about how Darnell was already dead, before he collapsed and continued to burn. I moved to help him, but it was clear it was already too late. I fired a few shots from my rifle at the beast, but it only seemed to piss the thing off. I quickly ran back inside and locked the bank down, barricading myself as I heard a loud growl and felt the beast throwing its weight against the doors, trying to break inside. Then, I heard the sound of more gunfire outside. That has to be Nathan, I thought. I quickly jumped on the radio. Nathan, get the hell out of there. Get back to the church. I'll handle this thing on my own or die trying, I screamed. I didn't want any more blood on my hands. I'm not sure what went wrong, but I'm guessing the thing caught up to him. I quickly ran back upstairs and looked out the window. I heard a loud howl, followed by a scream. Looking down at the street, I saw Nathan crawling across the road, missing a leg. The beast quickly caught up, burying its teeth into his spine and ripping it from his body with one quick, brutal bite. I was in absolute shock and horror at how quickly everything had failed. I fired a few more desperate shots at the beast from the window. It let out a loud growl and a howl before running off into the dark. Silence fell over the town. A moment later, my walkie-talkie crackled to life. Jack was on the other end. "This is on you," was all he said before going completely silent. I didn't argue, I couldn't. He was right. It was completely on me. An hour went by in silence before I decided it was safe to head back to the church. Once I arrived with the remaining guns and ammo, I locked the place down and barricaded the entrance. Sullenly, I walked toward Jack, Jimmy, Leanne, and August. I apologized to them before heading into the pastor's office to get some sleep. No one confronted me about it. I woke up the next morning to find Jack gone. Jimmy informed me that Jack had decided to leave town. I couldn't blame him. But after what I had seen, there was no way I could let that thing live. I looked around at Jimmy, Leanne, and August. The mood in the room was incredibly heavy, but I informed them that if they wanted to leave too, they were free to go. Jimmy put a hand on my shoulder and laughed. He spoke about how he had lived here his whole life, was raised here, and wasn't going to give up his home so easily. Leanne and August seemed just as set on sticking around. It was nice to have the support, but after last night, I had no plan. I wasn't sure how we were going to kill this thing, or if we even stood a chance against a predator like that. I had never seen anything so vicious or terrifying in my entire life. Leanne could see I was in a complete haze. She suggested something that sounded like complete suicide. She said we should hunt the thing down in the woods, taking the fight directly to its home. I laughed at this. I was probably losing my mind to some degree, but I wasn't that crazy just yet. "You got a plan to go with that suggestion?" I asked. Leanne shot me a look that said I was being an asshole. She wasn't wrong, either. I just didn't want any more blood on my hands. I tried a plan, Leanne. I thought it was a good plan, and it was well executed, except it failed. We lost 4 people because I completely underestimated this creature. I'm sorry for being a dick, but you didn't watch Bob's horrified expression as he was ripped in two and devoured in seconds. Jack was right. That's on me. You didn't see Nathan crawling for his life across the street before having his spine ripped out of his body. It's all on me. I failed us. I felt Jimmy's hand on my shoulder again. He told me it was okay. He said at least I had a plan at the time, and reminded me that everyone who stayed behind had volunteered of their own free will because of the love they had for their hometown. I couldn't believe it. In some ways, I thought Jimmy was incredibly naive or insane to want to stay and fight. Then again, his faith and confidence helped me collect myself. I let out a huge sigh. Well, if we're going to do this, we'll need all the guns we can carry. I shot that thing, and I'm sure I hit it more than once, but it only seemed to make it angry. We also need food and supplies in case we're out there for a while. Let's eat, load up, and head out as soon as possible. I don't know if this thing comes out during the day, but I'd like to get a head start before it gets dark. With that, we ate, packed all the guns and ammo we could stand to carry, and headed straight into the woods. I was pretty sure this was suicide. I thought it was highly likely that we'd never be heard from again, and whatever happened to our town would remain an unsolved mystery to the world. But regardless, I felt we had no choice but to push forward. Even if we died, hopefully, we'd kill this hellish beast in the process. We set off, and much of the day was spent searching for any sign of the beast. It was freezing cold, and the woods were dead silent. A part of me wished we would never find it, and that it had simply left our town for good. Maybe it would have been wiser to just abandon the town entirely. But then the sensible half of me said this thing needed to die. It would only come back to torment anyone who tried to live here or move on to neighboring towns. It wasn't long before I heard Leanne call out from up ahead. The group hurried to rejoin her. Upon our arrival, we found a deer lying on the forest floor in pieces. It was mostly just the head and a leg or two that remained, along with some torn organs and a massive pool of blood. Looking further, we found deep, dried claw marks on the surrounding trees. The beast had definitely been here. How long ago was hard to tell, but it wasn't immediate. There were some tracks and a trail of blood, but they faded over time. It wasn't long before night fell, and we decided to camp out but keep a strict watch. The first watch consisted of August and Jimmy, while the second watch would be handled by myself and Leanne. Exhausted from the stress and the trek, I passed out quickly. I woke up to the sound of gunshots and screaming. Upon leaving my tent, I saw Leanne with her gun raised in the air, shaking violently. She told me she had fired upon the monstrosity. She said the thing had emerged from the darkness and grabbed Jimmy before he could even react. Even now, we could still hear his agonizing screams echoing through the trees. Leanne started to run forward, but I grabbed her arm and told her to wait. We needed to travel together. It wasn't much safer, but it was the only way we stood a chance. August and Leanne nodded in agreement, and we grabbed our gear, rushing in the direction of Jimmy's screams. As we got closer, his screams grew more agonizing. I began to wonder if the thing was intentionally using him as bait to lead us deeper into the woods. Its methods felt incredibly sadistic. I pushed the thought out of my mind as we picked up speed, breaking through the branches and brush. The minutes grew longer, and the night grew colder. The further we pursued it, the more I felt we were already too late. I tried not to succumb to those thoughts, but it was becoming harder. Everyone was dying. Suddenly, we came upon a clearing. Jimmy was there, coughing up blood. He had been torn completely open and was trying to say something through gurgled, wet breaths. I leaned in closer, and as I did, I heard him whisper, "It's a trap." I looked up and screamed for the others to be ready. But as I did, I heard a sickening crunch from right behind us. I spun around. There was nothing but a bloody stump where August's head used to be, a geyser of blood spouting from his neck. Standing before us was the monstrosity. Seeing it in full view under the moonlight, I realized what it was. I couldn't be 100% sure in the shadows before, but now I was positive. This was the legendary Dogman of Michigan. Part of me didn't want to believe it, but it matched the descriptions of the legends and sightings down to the absolute smallest detail. Paralyzed in shock and dismay, I quickly collected myself and fired at the beast. It howled in rage, completely crushing August's head between its teeth before darting directly in my direction. I fired off another round, seeing the bullets enter its chest, but the force of its charge knocked me off my feet and slammed me hard into a tree. The beast was on top of me before I even hit the ground, but it suddenly let out an angry howl as a blast of buckshot hit its head. It turned, leaping onto a shocked Leanne, who bravely stabbed it in the face several times with her knife while I scrambled up and fired a few more rounds into its side. The creature quickly grabbed Leanne and hurled her directly at me. We both collided and hit a tree, but when I looked up, the beast was gone. "Are you okay, Leanne?" I gasped. She nodded in immense pain as we both slowly stood up. I looked around, shaking in fear, as I reloaded my shotgun, staring in the direction the Dogman had fled. I couldn't believe this thing was real. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would have never believed it. It had killed so many of my friends and destroyed my hometown. This thing needed to die. We spent the rest of the night trying to pursue our prey, but we never found it again. By daybreak, we were exhausted and wanted nothing more than to sleep, but sleeping out here meant certain death. Stopping in a small clearing, we decided to eat and keep watch together. Watching her closely, I could tell Leanne was having the exact same thoughts I was. Maybe we shouldn't have kept pursuing the Dogman. Maybe we should have turned back and gone home. "You can go home or leave the state completely if you need to, Leanne," I said. Leanne looked at me, seemingly debating it, before shaking her head. "No, we need to kill this thing." We both stood up, extinguished our small campfire, and continued our search for signs of the nemesis of the woods. Eventually, we found what we were looking for: fresh claw marks on the trees leading straight ahead. Wary that it could be another trap, I told Leanne to be careful as we proceeded. Eventually, we reached a dark cave. Could this be it? The beast's lair. Slowly, I approached the entrance, motioning for Leanne to wait outside and be ready. Stepping inside, I saw bones scattered everywhere. Some belonged to animals, others were unmistakably human. Moving deeper into the darkness, I found only an empty dead end. There were still bones confirming this was indeed the thing's lair, but it wasn't currently inside. Suddenly, the sharp sound of gunfire rang out from behind me. I heard Leanne cussing loudly and screaming my name. I rushed back outside but saw nothing except Leanne. "What did you see?" I demanded. She told me she had seen the beast, but it had quickly darted away into the thick brush when she fired at it. Realizing we were in the right place, I told Leanne that we should move away from the entrance and wait until nightfall, so we spent the remainder of the day waiting and preparing. I thought to myself about how this would end. It had to end tonight. We were running dangerously low on supplies, and I was not sure if this Dogman was going to let us just walk out of the woods to resupply anyway. By this point, the abandoned town might already be on the news. If anyone had passed through and saw the devastation, they likely would have called the state police. We probably should have done that ourselves, but I didn't want any more innocent blood on my conscience. As the sun began to set, I looked at Leanne. She doesn't need to die, I thought to myself, my fingers twirling a heavy object in my coat pocket. I stood up, loaded my gun, and headed straight toward the mouth of the cave. I could hear Leanne asking me where the hell I was going, but I kept walking. It was sunset when I approached the entrance. I fired a few loud shots deep inside the cave to draw the creature out. It didn't take long. 2 glowing red eyes appeared in the darkness, and soon, the massive beast stood before me. "You die tonight, you son of a bitch." I screamed. I charged forward, firing every shell in my shotgun. The thing was furious. It was about to leap directly onto me when a rifle bullet whizzed past my ear and struck its shoulder. "Leanne, go, run, now," I yelled. She kept firing, and the Dogman howled in pain before rushing toward her. I gave chase, pulling out my hunting knife, and leaped directly onto the creature's back. I stabbed it repeatedly, feeling the monster thrash and howl as a few more of Leanne's shots landed in its chest. "Leave, Leanne. I'm going to end this," I screamed, pulling out and waving a heavy stick of dynamite I had kept in my pocket as an absolute last-ditch effort. I couldn't see Leanne's expression, but I heard her shouting over the noise, telling me I was crazy, begging me not to do it, but I didn't listen. I stabbed again and again into the back of the creature's neck until it violently threw me off. I had its undivided attention. I had lost my knife, but I still had my lighter. As I slowly backed into the narrow entryway of the cave, I flicked the flame and lit the fuse of the dynamite. I watched as the creature rushed headfirst towards me. I still couldn't believe any of this was real. I felt the creature's massive jaws bury deep into my shoulder. I felt the life rapidly draining from my body, the warmth of my own blood flowing over my chest. Oddly enough, it felt peaceful. And then, everything disappeared in a deafening bang and a blinding flash of white light. The cave collapsed. I survived the blast and the collapse, though I'm still not entirely sure how. I wasn't sure if the monster we fought was truly dead under the rubble, but by the time I managed to drag myself back to the edge of the town, the news crews and search parties were already there. They had been sent out to find us. There were many questions from the authorities, none of which I knew how to answer. Eventually, our town went back to normal. Most of the townsfolk moved back in. "We haven't seen anything strange since that horrific week. I'm not sure if that thing is truly dead or if there are more of them out there. But some nights, on nights like that, I can still hear a low, haunting howling in the far distance. And on nights like those, I don't sleep." Part 1. The stalker in the snow. I am awoken in the middle of the night to the sound of heavy thumping and my dog, Benjamin, barking up a storm. Slowly getting up, I can hear my bones creaking. Age does that to anyone. Walking past a mirror, I stop to look at myself for a second and realize the years haven't been kind to me. "Come on, Sawyer," I tell myself. Keep it moving. As I walk out into the living room of my cabin, I listen closely. Benjamin is tailing close behind me. It's quiet now, save for the sound of the cold, howling winter winds outside. I take a peek through the window and see nothing. Then again, it's hard to see much of anything out in this storm, especially at this time of night. After a few minutes, I decide to walk back towards my bedroom and lay down again. The warmth of the blankets is incredibly welcoming and comforting. Winters are freezing out here in the forests and mountains of Washington. The cozy warmth of the bed makes an old soul like myself never want to get up. If God decided to take me right now, I'm quite sure I'd never even know I died. That's the level of comfort we are speaking of. Thump, thump. Benjamin goes wild with his barking again as I struggle to regain my bearings. Looking around, I debate if I even want to get up this time. "Quiet, boy," I tell Benjamin. "It's probably just the storm, buddy. Let's get some rest. We've got a long winter ahead and not many places to be, my friend." With that, Benjamin and I drift back to sleep. Morning arises, and after much struggle due to the aforementioned warmth of the blankets, I finally get up, get dressed, and decide to make some breakfast. There is nothing quite like bacon, eggs, and hash browns to start the morning, right? I'm pretty far out in the woods, but we do live close enough to a town that is only about an hour to an hour and a half away. During the fall, I always stock up on plenty of food to go along with the wild game I hunt myself. If there's one way I swear I will never leave this earth, it's through starvation. My heavy gut is living proof of that. I tell you what, I start up some coffee and decide to go outside to survey how much snow has fallen since last night. According to the weather forecast, we were supposed to have a slight lull during the day before the snow starts pounding us hard again tonight. Looking around, I see I'll have to do some heavy shoveling and clearing around the cabin, but I figure I can do that after I get some hot food in me. I turn around and see Benjamin, who just finished his business, run up to me excitedly, his tail wagging, just like the first day I pulled him from his mother when he was just a wee little pup. Now, he's a huge St. Bernard, and my most loyal and devoted friend. Sadly, his mother passed away a few years back, and the stray dog that impregnated her never stuck around anyway. I pet Benjamin, and as I do, I look over at the cabin. That's when I notice something odd. There appears to be some damage to my heavy front door. Walking over to examine it more closely, it seems there are several broken and chipped pieces of wood and a distinct deep indentation. That's strange. Could the storm have thrown something to cause this? I think on it for a moment, but ultimately decide to add reinforcing and repairing the front door to my to-do list for the day. I move back inside with Benjamin to check on my breakfast and the coffee. Shutting the door behind us, I let my coffee brew a bit longer. There's nothing quite like hot black coffee on a cold winter morning. I drink it straight. It reminds me of the wilderness. It can be bitter, but it's beautiful, ultimately. Once I finish my coffee, I take the time to clean everything up, do my dishes, and then spend much of the rest of my day shoveling snow and then repairing and reinforcing my door. I take quick breaks to use the bathroom and to make lunch, but by the time I'm through with it all, the sun is already beginning to set. I move inside, locking and barring the heavy door behind me. I start up dinner. I'm cooking up some deer sausage from a buck I killed a bit back. Deer sausage with some rice and beans isn't a bad meal at all. By the time I'm through eating, I can barely move. Looking over at Benjamin, I see he looks quite content as well. I take him outside to use the bathroom one last time before locking up for the night, turning off all the lights and heading back to bed. It takes no time at all for the world to disappear around me. Thump, 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 thump. What the hell is that? Slowly, I force myself out of bed, turning on a few lights as I head toward the noise. To my absolute shock, the wooden barricade on the front door is severely cracked. The barricade is made of a large, heavy piece of lumber, and yet it was nearly split in two. I make a mental note to get a steel bar for the barricade on my next trip to town. The thumping has stopped for now, but it's clear that someone or something is desperately trying to get inside my home. I grab my hunting rifle just in case and peek through the small windows. There doesn't appear to be anything out there. Granted, my windows aren't large enough for anyone or anything to fit through. They're so small, I'm not worried about an intruder getting in that way. The only real entry point is the front door, and whatever is out there wants in. For the rest of the night, I sit in my armchair wrapped in a blanket, my rifle resting across my lap, passing out as best as I can. When I awake, it's morning. I guess there was no more thumping, or maybe I was just too exhausted to notice. I prep breakfast before sliding the cracked wooden barricade out of its slot and opening the door. I can't even explain what I saw. The heavy wooden door frame is completely splintered. I decide right then and there that I'm heading to town today to get a proper barricade and a solid steel security door. Since it isn't supposed to snow again until tomorrow, I do just that. Most of my day is spent driving to town, buying a heavy-duty steel door, and replacing the ruined wooden framing. The new door is solid steel, but painted in such a way that it matches the rustic look of the log cabin. It isn't perfect, but it'll do. It is far more secure. By the time I get home, I have just enough time to hang the door, replace the frame, and set up the new heavy steel bar barricade. Soon after, I make dinner and take Benjamin out for his nightly business. As soon as that's over, I head straight to bed, carefully barring the door behind me. "We'll get some sleep tonight, Benjamin," I mutter. One way or another, we'll get some damn sleep, because nothing is getting through that steel door. With that, I pass out, blissfully unaware of the world around me. The next morning, I awake well-rested, surprised to find that I wasn't awoken by any banging on my door. Perhaps whatever animal had been doing it simply gave up after the first couple of nights of failing to get in. I go through my normal morning routine, make breakfast, and then take Benjamin out for a long walk. After locking up the cabin, I let him do his business, and we play in the snow for a bit, enjoying the quiet solitude and the beautiful mountain view. It's nice out here. Occasionally, you'll get some wild animal aggressively trying to get into your home, but they're usually just hungry and rarely pose a real threat to your life. Sure, you hear stories of people whose homes get broken into by a bear or a wild boar raiding the fridge, but more often than not, those people survive and never experience anything like it again. At worst, They fix their doors, maybe get a gun, and that is that they live the rest of their lives in peace. I don't really blame a wild animal for wanting food, but generally, you aren't going to see a bear wandering around in the dead of winter. So, I'm quite perplexed as to what was massive and heavy enough to mess up my previous heavy wooden door. I try not to dwell on it, though, because it'll only freak me out. I just continue to play with Benjamin for the rest of the afternoon. We head back inside that evening, because a massive winter storm is supposed to roll in tonight, and the forecast says it'll likely stay for the next week or so. I figure that means a lot of shoveling on my part, but I'm more than prepared for winters out here, seeing as I've lived in these woods for most of my life. It's hard to believe I used to dwell in the city when I was younger. I eventually got tired of the noise and society, and decided to move out here when I was around 25. Now, I'm 45, well-versed in wilderness living. My only real regret is that I didn't make the move sooner. Life is peaceful out here, for the most part. It's quite nice, and you never have to deal with people. Walking inside my cabin, I lock up and bar the steel door before cooking some dinner for myself and feeding Benjamin. I stay up for a while after doing the dishes, watching some TV, before finally turning out the lights around 10:00 p.m. and heading to bed. Thump, thump, thump. Benjamin, I think we have a guest again. What do you say we go greet him? Benjamin shoots up out of his dog bed, already on edge, as the violent thumping continues at the door. I grab my hunting rifle and head out into the living room. I still can't see anything through my small windows, so I look through the door's peephole. It's pitch black outside, and at first there doesn't appear to be anything there. But as I kept staring, a massive, unblinking eye suddenly filled the entire view of the peephole. It caught me completely by surprise, making me jump back in shock. This was immediately followed by another loud, persistent thumping that shook the steel door in its frame. Once I got over the initial surprise, I pounded back on the steel door with the butt of my rifle, getting sick and tired of being awoken in the middle of the night. I yelled at whatever was standing on my porch, "Listen here. I'm tired, I'm cranky, and I'm sick of waking up in the middle of the night. You can bang all you want, but you won't be getting through this steel door." There was a sudden heavy silence. Benjamin remained tense, growling softly as we waited to hear a response. After a few minutes of absolute quiet, we thought maybe I had successfully scared the thing off. Still, to be safe, I waited in the living room for another hour. Nothing. Finally, we went back to bed, and I passed out. I was suddenly shot out of bed, running for the front door at the deafening sound of metal crushing and my truck's security alarm blaring through the night. I looked out the window, but I couldn't see well through the heavy, swirling snow. A few seconds went by, and then, to my absolute horror, I saw my pickup truck literally flying through the air towards the side of my cabin. I threw myself backward onto the floor a split second before the truck impacted the outer wall. The entire cabin shook violently on its foundations. Benjamin barked like mad as I scrambled back to my feet. Shards of glass from the shattered windows littered the floor. Holding my rifle up, I looked through the scope out the broken window, but saw nothing but white snow. I wanted to go outside, but my survival instinct told me it was best not to. Whatever had destroyed my truck had thrown a multi-ton vehicle with enough force to smash it into the side of my cabin. I had never encountered any sort of animal capable of such a feat of strength. Based on the size of the eye I had seen in the peephole, whatever was out there couldn't be human or any normal animal at all. I quickly pulled out my phone and dialed the police. As I was waiting on the line for dispatch, a loud, terrifying howl echoed from the trees. The dispatcher asked for my address and what was happening, but all I could muster the courage to say was, "Get help over here right now." I blurted out my address and hung up. It took a few agonizing hours, but soon the sheriff arrived, his headlights cutting through the snow, and knocked on my door. He asked what had happened, and I explained everything, from the thumping on the first few nights to the eye in the peephole and the flying truck. Perplexed, he looked around the property and told me to stay put inside. I waited, rifle in hand, for his return. After a half hour or so, the sheriff came back inside. He informed me that he wasn't sure what the hell was going on, but he would take a report and return in the morning when the sun was up so he could see the area better. He told me to lock and barricade my door and to call him immediately if I heard anything else out of the ordinary. He handed me a business card with his direct number on it and drove away. I didn't sleep for the remainder of the night, but thankfully, I didn't hear anything else outside either. Morning finally came, and true to his word, the sheriff returned. We both looked around the property more thoroughly. It was snowing like crazy, and we couldn't find much of anything. The sheriff reassured me, saying the heavy snow had likely covered up any tracks that were made, and suggested I think about installing some sort of security system or some motion-activated trail cameras. I agreed, and soon after, he departed. I spent the rest of the day making frantic calls to my insurance company, arguing with them about how I had no clue what had thrown my truck into my house. I also boarded up the broken windows and made temporary repairs to the side of my cabin. After having the mangled truck towed away, I pulled my four-wheeler out of the shed and headed into town to buy some high-quality trail cameras. By the time I returned, night was falling fast. I quickly installed and tested the cameras, let Benjamin go to the bathroom, locked my ATV back in the shed, and went inside. I made dinner and tried to relax as best as I could, but I was extremely shaken by the events of the previous nights. I kept my rifle within arm's reach at all times. Every now and then, I found myself peeking through the peephole, but I saw nothing. I had barricaded the windows tightly to keep the freezing wind and snow out. The night was long, and every little creak of the cabin had me up, checking the locks. I was exhausted, but I couldn't bring myself to sleep. I was sure that whatever was out there would be back, if not tonight, then tomorrow night. Sure as shit. Just as I started to doze off, a loud, violent thumping rattled my front door. I got up and slammed my hand against the steel. "Go away. If you don't, I'll shoot you myself," I screamed. A terrifying howl answered me, followed by an even louder thud that made my floorboards shake. I held my rifle aimed straight at the door, waiting. I heard 2 more heavy thuds, followed by another loud howl, before everything went completely silent again. The thought crossed my mind to call the sheriff, but since things had fallen quiet and the steel door was holding strong, I decided against it. I was scared, for sure, but I wasn't in immediate danger as long as that barricade held. It was about 400 in the morning. I made some coffee and sat with Benjamin, waiting for daylight to come. Once the sun crested over the mountains and it was bright enough, I unlocked the door and headed out with Benjamin to check the door and the trail cameras. Aside from a fresh indentation in the steel, the doorframe seemed undamaged. I went to check the cameras next. Looking over the digital footage on my laptop, I was deeply disturbed. The cameras had captured photos of something massive. It looked to be about 9 feet tall, throwing its massive shoulder directly into my door before slinking away last night. I was in absolute shock. The creature clearly stood on 2 legs, but the resolution was too blurry in the heavy snow to tell what it actually was. I walked in the direction the creature had retreated, trying to follow the tracks, but the fresh snowfall made it impossible. I decided to head back to town on my four-wheeler to pick up even more cameras to place around the cabin itself. Soon after returning, I set them up in elevated positions where I would get a much better, clearer view of the thing if it returned. I spent the rest of the daylight working on repairing the side of my cabin. It was slow going, but it was coming along. Night came once again. Benjamin and I headed inside. I made dinner for us both and locked and barred the steel door behind us. I prayed that, by some miracle, I'd get some real rest tonight. To my surprise, I did. I didn't hear a single sound outside except for the falling snow. When morning came, I felt refreshed and a little better. I received a follow-up call from the sheriff. I informed him that I was okay and explained that I had installed the cameras as he suggested. I told him I had caught something bizarre on the footage and invited him over to see it. The sheriff came by, and we reviewed the blurry footage on my laptop. After a long silence, the sheriff suggested something incredibly odd. He said he didn't normally jump to such far-fetched conclusions, but he believed there was a chance the creature could be a Bigfoot. I laughed at first, thinking he was joking, until I noticed the deadpan look on his face. "You can't be serious, right, Sheriff?" The sheriff nodded seriously. He told me he had seen some incredibly strange things during his long career in the deep woods of Washington. He had investigated other claims of strange, unexplained happenings that went completely unsolved. He had seen massive, unidentifiable tracks before, and he was absolutely convinced Bigfoot existed. I wanted to laugh, but the seriousness of the situation stopped me. "Well, what the hell am I supposed to do about this if you're right, Sheriff?" He shook his head, unsure of what to say, before putting a hand on my shoulder. He told me to install the rest of my cameras, double-check my locks and reinforcements, and keep my gun close at all times. "If this thing is as aggressive as it seems, you're going to need all the help you can get," he warned. He then offered to stick around and spend the night at my cabin. I almost declined, not wanting to be a burden, but thinking better of it, I agreed. Better safe than sorry. The next couple of nights went by quickly. I slept peacefully, and not a single thing happened. The creature didn't return. By the end of the week, the snow was finally beginning to let up. I shook the sheriff's hand and thanked him before he went on his way. He told me that if anything else happened, to call his cell directly, and he'd head straight over. We had worked on the cabin over the past couple of days. The side was fully repaired, and we had almost finished replacing the shattered windows. I was feeling much more relaxed since the creature hadn't shown up in 3 nights. That relaxation lasted only as long as it took me to pull the memory cards and check the security cameras. As I scrolled through the photos, my blood ran cold. The sheriff and I had not been alone. The cameras had captured the creature several times over the last few nights. In some photos, it was simply sitting in the tree line, watching the cabin. In others, it was lurking right next to the sheriff's patrol vehicle, peering inside the windows before slinking back into the shadows. At one point, during a time when I knew the sheriff and I were awake and talking inside, the camera caught a clear shot of the creature standing right on the porch, its massive ear pressed against the steel door, listening to us. I never got a completely clear shot of its face, so I still didn't have definitive proof of what it looked like, but one thing was clear. This thing was highly intelligent. It knew I wasn't alone, which is why it hadn't attacked. It was waiting for the sheriff to leave. My first instinct was to call the sheriff back, but upon further reflection, I decided against it. If I was ever going to rid myself of this stalker and get a clear shot of it, I had to stay alone. I had to let it think I was vulnerable. So that's what I did. I made a real meal, fed Benjamin, and went to bed early. I waited quietly in the dark, hoping to hear the creature. I made sure all the cameras were running. I was prepared to find proof of the thing that stalked me. At some point in the night, though, I must have drifted off, because before I knew it, morning had arrived. I went to the kitchen to make breakfast, noticing that it had started snowing heavily again. I checked the weather on my phone. A new system had developed overnight, bringing heavy snowfall. It looked like I was going to be snowed in for a while. Thinking nothing of it, I ate breakfast and headed outside with Benjamin to check the trail cameras. But when I reached the first tree, my heart sank. The cameras were gone. I searched the snowy yard and found them completely destroyed, their plastic casings shattered and scattered across the snow. The memory cards were snapped in half. The only photos I managed to salvage from the wreckage showed nothing but solid black or white snow. It was as if the creature knew exactly where the cameras were, avoided their line of sight, and then systematically ripped them down one by one, leaving the broken husks behind as a warning. There's no way a wild animal, even a Bigfoot, could be that intelligent, right? I tried to shake off the terrifying thought, went inside and called the sheriff. It didn't take long for him to arrive, and we discussed the situation. "I'm at a loss, Sheriff," I admitted. "I don't know what to do now. If I buy more cameras, this thing will just destroy them. I don't know what it's capable of. And if I have you or anyone else stay here, it won't show its face. You can't stay here forever." The sheriff seemed just as perplexed as I was. He agreed that buying more cameras would just be a waste of money. Confused by the creature's apparent intellect, He told me to keep my gun close and call him if it attacked again. Soon after, he drove away, looking every bit as worried as I felt. What was I going to do? There was no way I could ignore this thing, and no way to catch it in the act. I had never felt so utterly hopeless. Deciding that panicking wouldn't help my situation, I went about my day shoveling snow, chopping firewood, and playing with Benjamin, trying to stay as relaxed as possible. That night, I ate dinner, watched some movies, and tried to sleep. To my surprise, I awoke at 900 the next morning. I had slept in. Benjamin was licking my face, whining to go outside to use the bathroom. I let him out, looking around the property. Everything seemed completely normal until I went to check my storage shed. The heavy padlock had been snapped off. My four-wheeler was missing. Shit, this thing wanted me completely stranded. I wasn't too worried about food. I had plenty of supplies to last the winter. But the realization that my only remaining mode of transportation was gone left me with a deep sense of unease. I searched the surrounding area for my vehicle for over an hour, finally finding it at the bottom of a steep ravine. It had been pushed off the drop-off and was wrapped violently around a tree, completely totaled. Heading back home, I called the sheriff and explained what happened. I insisted that he shouldn't come stay with me, because the only way this thing would show itself was if I was alone with nothing but my dog. He agreed not to stay, but asked me to show him where the four-wheeler was found. I met him there, and we spent the remainder of the day examining the wreckage and filing a report before he left. This was absolute madness. When I finally settled in for the night, I had an incredibly uneasy feeling. Something felt horribly wrong about tonight. It wasn't just that this thing was systematically isolating me, it was that it seemed to know I had nowhere else to go. It was as if it had chosen me specifically because it knew I lived completely alone with no family nearby. How long had this thing been watching me? Days, weeks, months, or had it been years? Whatever the case, it knew exactly when to strike, so it wouldn't get caught. It was highly intelligent, and I was officially out of options. All I could do was wait for it to try and break into my home and deal with it accordingly. I lay in bed, clutching my rifle, pondering what I would do when the moment came, until I finally drifted off to sleep. Thump, 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 thump. The banging was louder than it had ever been. I was shot out of bed, running for my phone. I immediately dialed the sheriff's number. As the phone began to ring, I ran to the living room and watched in absolute horror as the solid steel door began to buckle and bend under the force of the blows. "Hello? Sawyer? Are you there? Sawyer? Sawyer, is that your dog barking?" Part 2. The Sheriff's Report. This is the Sheriff. It was about half an hour after the call cut out before I managed to arrive at Sawyer's cabin, my siren wailing through the blizzard. When I got out of my patrol car, my headlights illuminated a horrific scene. The side of the cabin was heavily damaged, and the new steel door was lying flat on the floor inside, mangled and twisted like a piece of tinfoil. There was blood splattered all over the entryway. Stepping inside, my flashlight beam cut through the darkness. The cabin's lights were completely dead. The interior was in absolute ruins. Furniture was smashed, and several inner doors were completely destroyed. I made my way to the back room, my gun drawn there. Huddled in the corner of a destroyed closet, I found Sawyer. He was shivering violently, his hunting rifle clutched tightly to his chest, his eyes wide with sheer terror. It took a lot of gentle persuasion, but I finally got Sawyer to hand me the gun. I called in the crime scene investigators to secure the cabin and brought Sawyer down to the station. After wrapping him in a blanket and giving him some hot cocoa, we let him calm down from the shock. Once he was able to speak, he explained to me what had happened. He said he awoke to the sound of violent banging on his door. He tried to call me, but as soon as the line connected, the steel door began to give way. He backed off into the living room, realizing the heavy door was about to collapse inward. As soon as the steel door crashed down, a massive creature entered his home. His Saint Bernard, Benjamin, immediately charged the beast, biting at it bravely before being violently thrown across the room. Benjamin got right back up, barking and snapping with defensive rage. Sawyer said he raised his rifle and emptied every single bullet he had into the creature's chest. The thing didn't even flinch. It simply reached up, ripped the phone line out of the wall, and crushed the phone to pieces. I stopped Sawyer there and asked him, "Did you kill it?" Sawyer shook his head, trembling. He said he grabbed his backup shotgun and emptied every shell of buckshot he had directly into its torso at point-blank range. Only then did the creature let out an angry, deafening howl, turn around, and run back out into the snowy night. Sawyer is absolutely convinced that his stalker is still alive and well out in those woods. We staged a few more stakeouts around the property, and per his wishes, I left him alone for several nights after. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. There was never another peep, nor another harassment from the creature again. Sawyer and I became close friends, prompted by our shared involvement in this bizarre, terrifying case. He still suffers from severe PTSD to this day from the events of that winter. However, he has completely repaired his cabin and continues to live there alone in the exact same spot. Although he fears his attacker might one day return, he stubbornly refuses to move. We remain friends to this day. To this day. The mountains were so beautiful. I made a stop at an overlook on the Blue Ridge Parkway. According to the old wooden sign, the elevation was 3,584 feet above sea level. The fall colors were so bright and overwhelming. This was the perfect weekend to be on the parkway. It was definitely the prime time for seeing the autumn foliage in its perfect beauty. In another couple of weeks, the leaves would start falling off. Lots of folks are terrible at timing their trips to be here during the peak season. But I am evidently pretty darn good at it. I just realized how wide I was smiling. I was so happy to be off for the weekend and by myself, getting a much-needed break from my mundane accounting job. That big smile, however, dissolved pretty quickly with the sudden remembrance of my dead-end, unfulfilled career. I took one last look, hopped into my car, and checked the GPS for the distance to my cabin rental for the weekend. It was just a few more miles down the road. The road was almost pitch black, and it felt like I was driving through a tunnel that was on fire from the vibrant red leaves. I was happy that my rental would be at such a high elevation. The GPS showed 1 mile to go, and my car was still climbing upward. According to the directions I was given by the cabin owners, the Swansons, I would be looking for a narrow dirt road on my right. The name was simply Victoria Lane. It was a rather distinguished name for such a narrow, rocky dirt road at the top of the mountain. I turned in and made my way up the winding path. The tree branches hung down, as if trying to grab the roof of my car and stop me from going any further. As I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw a massive dust cloud trailing behind me. One thing I did not see was other houses, just endless trees and rocks. Then, the road started to get steep. Very steep, to be quite honest. It started to freak me out. I was driving a Mini Cooper, and it took everything the poor little car had to keep going. How in the hell do people get up this road in the rain or snow? Thank God, the road started to level out a couple of minutes later, and it didn't sound like my engine was about to have a heart attack anymore. I drove for a couple of minutes more until I saw a 2-story log cabin on the left. This was the Swansons' home, where I would be picking up the keys to my rental. This house was gorgeous. It looked like something that would be featured on the cover of a mountain scenery calendar. These folks had to be absolutely loaded. I pulled into the driveway and got out of the car. The Mini looked visibly relieved that it was finally going to be able to rest. I chuckled as I parked my little car in the neighborhood. Yep, these people were definitely loaded. There was a newer model Range Rover in the garage and a sleek Tesla parked right alongside it. I was not sure what these folks did for a living, but business was evidently very good. I was met at the front door before I even knocked by a middle-aged woman with blonde hair and a very petite figure. She gave me a smile that appeared to be highly forced, but I didn't really care. I wasn't here to make friends. I was just here to get my cabin key. "Mr. Smith, I presume?" the woman said solemnly. "Yes. You have a beautiful home. Thank you for renting out your cabin to me," I said. "The house is too large and is more trouble than it's worth. she said in a very sorrowful voice. I thought it was a rather weird statement, but I shrugged it off. Well, I'm certainly impressed with it, I said quickly. Here are your keys. The cabin is up the road. Enjoy your stay, she said, and shut the door quickly. I turned around and mumbled, good talk. As I got back into my car, I drove down the cement driveway back to Victoria Lane. The road curved around the back of the house, which was just as immaculate as the front. There was a very impressive pool and a pool house out back. The pool house alone would put a lot of people's real houses to shame. The road started to get steep again. I shifted the car into low gear, and the Mini huffed and puffed for a little while longer until I came upon a clearing. I saw the rental cabin up on the left. This cabin was even more beautiful than the pictures online. It was basically a smaller version of the owner's home. I saw a man in the yard trimming the hedges. He looked middle-aged as well, so I assumed he was Mr. Swanson. He didn't seem to notice me driving up, or perhaps he just didn't give a damn. Hey there, one hell of a place you have out here. Gorgeous, I said to the man, but his back remained turned, and he didn't respond at all. I grabbed my suitcase and walked up the wooden steps to the porch. I unlocked the door and placed my suitcase inside. I turned around to offer a second attempt at conversation with the man, but then I heard a motor starting. He was driving off on a John Deere Gator utility vehicle without looking my way whatsoever. Geez, whatever happened to good old Southern hospitality? I shrugged, went into the house, and looked around. It was spotless, looking like something straight out of a Pottery Barn catalog. They had definitely spared no expense on the furniture and decorations. The cabin had a very pleasant woody aroma and a nice potpourri scent, not too strong, just right. I went into the bedroom and fell face first onto the incredibly comfortable king-size bed. I was worn out from the long ride and decided to take a short nap. I had almost drifted off to sleep when I heard a knock on the door. I was startled, as I was almost asleep and shouldn't have been expecting any visitors. I didn't think the highly unsociable owners would have dropped by for tea. I got up and slowly went to the front door. There was no one there. Thinking I might have been in a half-dream state and imagined the knock, I turned to head back. But then I heard a squeaking sound to my left. I walked out the front door, onto the rustic, wraparound porch, and turned left. The wooden floorboards creaked softly under my weight. As I rounded the corner of the house, I saw a little girl on a tire swing, attached to an enormous oak tree that had to have been a couple of 100 years old. She had long brown hair and was wearing a bright yellow dress. She was staring at me, wearing a big smile, as if she knew me. Well, hello, I said in a perplexed tone. Hi there. My mommy and daddy own the cabin, and we live just down the way, she said. Okay, great. This cabin is terrific. What's your name? I asked. Victoria, she replied. Oh, cool. So your parents named the road after you? Can't say I have my own road, I said with a grin. Yeah, it's pretty great that way. I never forget my address, she said with a giggle. The little girl appeared to be about 8 or 9 years old. I didn't ask her exact age, thinking it might sound a little too creepy. Do your mom and dad know you're up here? I asked. Yeah, I spend a lot of time outside, and I love this swing. There's a path right there that goes directly to my house. You should check it out sometime. My dad even built me a treehouse down that way. I squinted and strained to see in the bright sunlight. Yep, I think I see the path over there. Sure, I'll check it out before I leave. I always wanted a treehouse when I was little, but I never got one. Definitely one of the drawbacks of growing up in the city. I said, Well, it was nice to meet you, Victoria. I'm going to head inside for a nap. I'm rather pooped from the long drive. Yes, sir. Nice meeting you too. She waved and continued to swing as I turned to go back into the house. I headed back into the bedroom, still hearing the rhythmic squeaking of the swing outside. I opened up the bedroom window to let in some fresh mountain air, lay back down, and drifted to sleep. A sudden knock at the door jolted me awake. It was dark outside. I glanced at the glowing red numbers on the bedside clock. 9:30 p.m. Another knock came. Who's there? I called out as I slowly dragged myself out of bed and headed to the front door. I glanced through the window curtain and saw Victoria smiling at me, holding a wicker basket. "Hey, Victoria," I said, opening the door. "It's kind of late. What's up? Do your mom and dad know you're up here?" I thought it was incredibly odd for a young girl to be out alone at this time of night. "Yes, sir. They know. They sent me up here to give you this," she said excitedly. She handed me a wooden basket containing a warm linen cloth wrapped around something. A delicious aroma wafted from it. I slowly unwrapped the mystery object. It was a batch of fresh chocolate chip cookies. "Wow, cookies. And they're still hot," I said. "Yep, I helped Mommy bake them myself. We always bake a batch for new guests. I'm sorry we didn't get them up here sooner. Well, good night." "It's my bedtime, and Mommy told me to hurry back." She smiled and ran off into the darkness incredibly fast. "Thank you, and please tell your mom thank you for me," I yelled as she disappeared into the night. I went back into the cabin, sat down on the sofa, and placed the basket on my lap. I flipped on the TV, loaded up Netflix, found Doctor Who, and started shoving cookies into my mouth. "Damn, these are good," I mumbled to myself as I ravenously devoured them. Before I knew it, I had eaten every single cookie in the basket. I watched the show for a couple of hours before dozing off on the couch. I woke up at about 6 a.m. the next morning and decided to get an early start, planning to head to Grandfather Mountain for a day of hiking. I got dressed, headed out the door, and got into my car. I drove down the steep gravel road, riding the brakes due to the sharp grade. I glanced over at the Swansons' home, but there didn't seem to be any activity yet, which made sense for an early Saturday morning. As I rounded the last turn before reaching the main highway, I suddenly slammed on my brakes. There was a little girl lying on the dirt road next to a pink bicycle. It was Victoria. I jumped out of the car and sprinted over to her. She was crying. Her jeans were ripped at the knee and she was bleeding heavily. "Victoria, are you okay?" I exclaimed. "Yeah, I think so." "I just cut my knee, and it's bleeding pretty bad," she said between painful sobs. It was a deep, nasty gash. Blood was flowing down her leg like lava pouring out of a volcano. "We need to put some pressure on it. Let me get something out of my car," I said. Back home, I was a volunteer firefighter and had my EMT certification, so I knew a thing or two about first aid. As I went to stand up, she stopped me. "We can just use my sweatshirt. It's old and worn out. No biggie," she said, untying a white Hello Kitty sweatshirt from around her waist and handing it to me. I promptly folded the sweatshirt, placed it on her knee, and applied firm pressure. She let out a small cry of pain. The cut was indeed deep. She was definitely going to need stitches. "We need to get you back to your mom," I said, looking at her pink bike and then back at her. "Listen, I have a bike rack on the back of my car. I'm going to load your bike on there, and then we'll drive up to your house. Put your hand here and keep holding pressure until it stops bleeding, okay?" I spoke quickly but calmly to keep her from getting any more upset. I stood up, picked up the little pink bike, walked to the back of my car, and latched it onto the rack. Afterward, I walked back around the car to help Victoria. She was gone. Only her bloody Hello Kitty sweatshirt remained on the dirt road. I looked around frantically, yelling her name, but there was no response. It was like she had vanished into thin air. It hadn't taken me more than a minute to attach her bike to my car. She couldn't have had enough time to walk anywhere, let alone run, without me noticing. This was insane. Where was she? I pulled out my cell phone, searched my emails for the Swansons' phone number, and dialed. It rang 3 times before a woman answered. "Hi, Mrs. Swanson. This is the renter, Terry Smith. As I was driving out today, I found Victoria in the road. She had fallen off her bike. She is mostly fine, but she has a deep cut on her knee. She was putting pressure on it, but while I was attaching her bike to my car rack, she ran off. Is she back at the house by any chance?" I asked, out of breath. "Victoria?" The woman whispered. There was a long, chilling pause. Then the line went dead. "This is freaking weird," I muttered to myself. I called out Victoria's name a few more times, but there was still no answer. I walked to both sides of the road, peering deep into the woods, but she wasn't there. Why wasn't she answering me? She couldn't have gone far. Why would she just run off? It hit me that she might have left a blood trail, given how heavily her knee was gushing. I looked all over the dirt road and the brush, but saw absolutely nothing. No footprints, no blood. I got back into the car, threw her bloody sweatshirt onto the back seat, and proceeded to do a 3-point turn in the road to head back up to the main house. Just as I started back up the hill, I heard the wail of a siren. I stayed put, looking in my rearview mirror. A sheriff's deputy cruiser pulled onto the dirt road behind me. The deputy bolted out of his car with his weapon drawn, screaming for me to get out of my vehicle with my hands up. He was a very large, muscular officer wearing sunglasses, but all I could focus on was the barrel of the handgun pointed straight at my chest. I was in complete shock. I had no idea what was happening. As I stepped out of the car, the Swanson's Range Rover came speeding down the road from the opposite direction, kicking up dirt. "What the heck is going on? Why are you pointing a gun at me?" I yelled, "Shut the fuck up. Get on your knees and put your hands behind your head." The officer screamed. The Range Rover slammed on its brakes, sliding on the loose gravel, and both doors swung open. The Swansons jumped out of the car as if it were on fire. "Where's my daughter? Where is she?" The woman screamed hysterically. Her husband said nothing. He appeared to be too shocked to speak, simply running behind his wife. "Jesus, she was just here, and then she was gone." I said, "Where is the girl?" The deputy demanded. "I don't know. She fell off her bike and she was right here." I pointed at the bike on my car rack to show I wasn't crazy. "Oh my God, look." The mother screamed, sobbing uncontrollably when her eyes landed on the pink bicycle. "Is that Victoria's bike, ma'am?" the deputy asked. "Yes, that's hers. This monster has her," she cried, pointing at me. "Have her?" "What the heck are you talking about? I don't have her." I stopped to help her. "That is all. She can't be far," I pleaded. The deputy went over to my car looking through the windows. He opened the back door, saw the back seat, and immediately spoke into his radio. "I need backup at my location now," he said quickly. Then he turned to the mother, holding something up. "Ma'am, is this your daughter's sweatshirt?" He was holding the white Hello Kitty sweatshirt, now heavily stained with blood from Victoria's knee. The mother's eyes went wide. She turned completely pale and fell to her knees. Yes, that was what she was wearing when she went missing. "Oh my God, is that blood on it?" She suddenly charged at me, screaming, "What have you done to my little girl?" "What have you done?" The deputy pulled her off me, and she collapsed back onto the ground, sobbing hysterically. Her husband fell to his knees beside her, cradling her. They were utterly distraught. I couldn't blame them, but I had absolutely no idea what was happening. The husband was staring at me as if he had just seen a ghost. "I didn't do anything to Victoria. This is ridiculous." I yelled, sweating profusely and shaking in disbelief. I was on the verge of hyperventilating. The deputy violently pulled my arms behind my back, handcuffed me, and threw me into the back of his cruiser, my head slamming hard against the roof. More police cars arrived shortly after, sirens wailing, as officers began scouring the woods. All I could do was shake my head and stare at the floor of the cruiser, desperately trying to wake up from this living nightmare. Another officer came, opened the door, and questioned me. I explained everything exactly as it happened: the tire swing, the cookies last night, the bicycle accident this morning. They just looked at me as if I were completely insane. Maybe I was. I just kept repeating over and over that I hadn't done anything to her, that she was somewhere in the woods, and that they could just ask her themselves when they found her. Then the officer made a statement that burned itself into my brain, a statement that will never leave me. "Sir, Victoria has been missing for 6 months. That's impossible. She was here. I saw her yesterday, last night, and this morning. I'm not crazy." I screamed, holding back tears and vomit. "Be that as it may, sir, you are under arrest for the kidnapping of Victoria Swanson, and God only knows what else. You're going to tell us where she is," the deputy said coldly. He slammed the door, got into the driver's seat, and pulled out onto the highway, heading toward the police station. I looked back out the window. The scene behind us was a frantic spectacle of police searching the woods. The parents were still on the ground, sobbing in each other's arms. We hadn't even driven 100 yards down the highway when my blood suddenly ran ice cold and my heart plummeted into my stomach. I saw a small figure standing in the woods, positioned perfectly between two tall pine trees, watching our car ride away. It was her. It was Victoria. Her face was like stone, showing absolutely no emotion. I began to scream. I began to scream. I began to scream.